Hi everyone, my name's Amy Tanner, and tonight we're going to look at food selectivity and autism and looking at an alternative to using escape extinction as a treatment for food selectivity. Um, for those that don't know me, here's a little bit about me. I started in BC as a BI in 2008. From then I worked my way up to a JBC and then moved abroad to live in France for a year and Egypt for a year to work as a junior behavior consultant with young children with autism there. I became a board certified behavior analyst in 2013. I was a clinical supervisor for Canada's largest clinic after that for about 4 years. I've got to combine my passions for travel and ABA research together, and I've been lucky to present all over the world. So I presented research in Sweden and Italy, the UK, France, Germany, Japan, and Greece. In addition to that, I volunteer with the Global Autism Project, which is an organization that brings autism training into under-resourced areas. And so I've helped set up autism clinics in Jakarta in Indonesia, as well as Prague, Czech Republic. I've been a board member for the BC ABA for the last 2 years, heading up the conference committee, a member at large for conference. I've taught at Capilano University, I think, for 4 or 5 years. So I teach both the single subject research design and statistics, as well as behavior assessment and intervention there. And for those that are active on social media, you can follow me if you want at Dr. Amy Tanner on Instagram. I do have a professional Facebook page. I'm not as active on there. When I'm not doing ABA and autism things, I love dogs and yoga and goal setting. I'm super interested in positive psychology, how to achieve optimal health, cold plunges, traveling, entrepreneurship. I love studying high performers and giftedness, as well as recently I've gotten back into gymnastics. I was a gymnast as a child, and now I've started to do adult gymnastics, which is so much fun. Just some pictures presenting in Germany there, Sicily, Italy, Kyoto, Japan, and Paris, France there. So that's a little about me. We'll jump right into talking about food selectivity. So food selectivity, what is it? So for a long time, there was no standard definition across the literature for food selectivity. So even though there's been a lot of papers on it up until about 2010, there's focus on pickiness, rigidity, selective eating, and mealtime behavior. Then in 2010, Bandini and all, they put forth more of a standardized definition of food selectivity, which included food refusal, limited food repertoire, and high frequency food intake. And so what that is, so food refusal is just refusing food when it's offered. So a high amount of just saying, no, I don't want that. Limited food repertoire. So from using a 3-day food journal, looking at how many unique foods were consumed over 3 days. So just, a child that only eats maybe 4 foods would have a limited food repertoire. And then high frequency single food intake. So eating the same food multiple times a day. So foods that are eaten more than 4 or 5 times per day. This doesn't include beverages. So those are the 3 different areas of food selectivity that this definition has operationalized. When we talk about being selective, so throughout the research, there's lots of examples of being selective by different components. So you can be selective by texture and consistency, selective by temperature. Maybe you like cold foods, maybe you like hot foods, maybe you don't like one or the other. Maybe you only want your food lukewarm. I know for my coffee, I like it like scalding hot. Selective by smells. A lot of people don't like the smell of seafood, so that could be something that they're selective by. Color, it might be a color that you only want to eat or a color that you don't want to eat. By shape, so maybe you prefer your sandwich cut in triangles, and when it's cut the other way, it's a no deal. By presentation and packaging, so presentation could be the plate that's used, how it's served, Packaging, you may have heard this before of other children that are really attached to one type of food, and then the company goes and changes the packaging, and they don't want it anymore. Or the parent takes it out of the packaging and puts it in their lunchbox packaging, and they won't eat it because it's not in the original packaging. So nothing has changed with the food, but the packaging's changed. So there can be selectivity just due to the packaging. By brand, so being able to even identify the difference between that's what I'm looking for, generic brands as well as the top brands that we know. So I've seen children that they would only eat brand name Cheerios. When it was generic Cheerios, they would literally pick out the non-brand name Cheerios. So being very selective by which brand it is. I've seen that with yogurt and with other foods. There could be a taste component there. It could be a packaging component as well, but just something that people have noted selectivity by. Utensil requirements. So that could be effort response. So if I need to use a spoon with it, if I need to use chopsticks with it, if I need to use a fork with it, I might just avoid those foods altogether. So when we're treating food selectivity, we want to look at are there any patterns on what they're selective by? Because it might, that could really help dictate what type of intervention we want to use and how we want to approach it. So as you're collecting data on selectivity, it would be important to note what do they eat, what don't they eat, and are you seeing any consistent patterns across what are they selective by? So food selectivity in ASD. So children with ASD exhibited more food refusal and a smaller food repertoire than neurotypical children. I'm sure you're not surprised by that. The prevalence is anywhere from 40 to 90%, which I know that's a huge gap. The main reason for that gap is the lack of the standard operational definition. So because everyone was using different definitions for identifying food selectivity, it was hard to get an accurate picture. But it's about double of what's seen in neurotypical children, which can be 30 to 50%. Most of the research has relied solely on parent questionnaires, so that's important to note as well. I've worked with a lot of parents before where they've told me that their child's very selective what they eat. It's hard to get them to eat anything, and as we start to list out all the foods that they eat, I've got pages of them, and they're 20 or 30. So sometimes the perception of my child's a very picky eater is not always the case when you actually start to look at all the foods that they do consume. So as I said, the lack of consistent operational definition across the studies and parent reports as the primary indicator helps account for the variance across the literature. Many case reports and anecdotal evidence to suggest food selectivity is a problem. However, only a few empirical studies exist to really understand the prevalence of it. There's many challenges in treating food selectivity or treating limited food repertoire or increasing food repertoire. So first off, looking at family food preferences and meal times. So there's research to look at a lot of times pickiness or limited food repertoire can be a factor of what they're exposed to, and they're not seeing family foods. If they're not seeing their family consume different foods, they're going to be more limited as well. So challenges in treating food selectivity could be the family food preference and mealtime routines. This could also be around expectation of what the family tends to eat. So if they're eating foods that are highly spicy or highly texturized or lots of sauces or very kind of sensory overload, that might be more difficult for a child to eat those than a child that's brought up where they're eating very basic, like a lot more carbs or something like that. So looking at family food preferences, some families, they might eat a high amount of vegetables, which that is difficult for toddlers and young children to eat. There's actually research to show that broccoli in itself has this one enzyme in it that kids up until 4 or 5 really taste it as far more bitter. And then over time, they're desensitized to it. But sometimes the desensitization doesn't decrease as much in every child. And so some people find broccoli very aversive, and not everyone's going to taste it the same. But it's one thing to keep in mind when you're selecting targets. If you're working with a child that's selective in food, broccoli might not be a great place to begin. That's always a big goal of parents, but I tend to like to build a bridge towards that. Oral motor ability. And so if there's any concerns with this, or actually anytime you're starting a feeding program, it's great to get both an SLP and or OT to take a look at chewing, and are they there's lots that has to happen with oral motor ability in order to be able to safely swallow food. So are they breaking it down properly? Are they able to form this little, what's called a bolus of food in their mouth? Are there any problems swallowing? Some things you can look for is if a child, every time they're eating, if they're trying to drink large amounts of water with it, that might be a sign that there's some weak oral motor activity happening, and it's difficult for them to actually swallow. So they're trying to lubricate the food to help it go down. I've had a child where they put olive oil on everything. And then we brought them to an SLP, and there's definitely lots of oral motor activities that could help improve the chewing. That's going to definitely lead to food selectivity. We're going to avoid foods that are difficult to eat or that make us feel like we're gagging or choking. So oral motor ability is going to be a challenge to treating food selectivity. Behavior and compliance during food training. So I did create this presentation in 2015, and so there's definitely probably some language that I would switch now, like compliance. But even if we think of cooperation with behavior, we don't want to ever prompt a child to eat something, right? So if a child's not able to understand a different motor skill, we're able to full prompt, of course, with consent. Where if a child's refusing food, there's not much that we're going to be able to do to prompt that. That's going to be safe or ethical to do. So we're not really able to prompt a correct response. So that's a challenge to treating food selectivity. When they already have restricted diets, any changes to their diets can also result in where they're going to give up more food and lose more food. So if they're only eating 6 unique different foods across their food journal, and we start to mess around too much with meal times and put too much pressure on eating, they may start to even give up those small amount of foods and actually show regression in food because they're trying to gain more control over their eating. So that's something to watch too. So when their child's already eating so little, we want to make sure that any intervention is only going to add to their repertoire and not lead to more restricted diets. GI problems, so gastrointestinal problems. So there have been significant differences noted between children with ASD and neurotypical children, with the reports of more diarrhea, more constipation, more rigidity around bowel movements, etc. And so they've done research, and I don't think at this time it's conclusive, but they're looking at, is there physiological differences like in the gut with kids with autism, or are these GI issues caused from a behavior etiology rather than primary organic gastrointestinal etiology? And what that means is, are the instances of diarrhea and constipation more due to, say, rigidities around, maybe not eating any foods that have fiber intake, maybe being rigid about times or places that they have bowel movements. So if they're only willing to have bowel movements at home, but they're at school and then they're in an after-school program, and then maybe a family member picks them up, they may be holding it longer. That could be leading to different problems in constipation. So that could be the source of a lot of the GI problems rather than actually a physiological difference. There's just many kind of theories and some research on both sides saying that there are definitely physiological differences, or it's more of a behavioral etiology. But those all lead to challenges when we're looking at how we're going to intervene. So before 2015, which again, I'm going to kind of go through the research as well as show a study that I did as an alternative to escape extinction. But prior to 2015, and still most of the literature from 2015 to present, when you look up feeding interventions, you're going to see a plethora of escape extinction and escape extinction packages. So escape extinction on its own, escape extinction with differential reinforcement, escape and attention extinction, spoon distance fading with escape extinction, repeated taste exposure with escape extinction. And so what escape extinction is, or it's also known as non-removal of the spoon, is that literally the food does not go away until it's consumed. And so it might be you might be waiting hours for the food to get consumed before the child's allowed to leave the table. So there's a ton of research on it, on that it works, on that it's been efficient, it's effective, but there can be a lot of challenges with escape extinction. So first off, the role of escape extinction. So it's supporting that negative reinforcement plays a role in the maintenance of pediatric feeding problems. So the more I get to escape when the food's presented, the more I'm going to try and escape. And so food selectivity can be largely reinforced by a food I don't want comes out, I throw it on the ground, the food goes away and don't need to eat anymore, or I run from the table and I don't need to eat it anymore. And so that behavior can reinforce more desire to escape because it's a way to get the food to go away. So that eliminates that root cause. A meta-analysis that looked at the efficacy of interventions to improve feeding difficulties, out of 23 articles, all had used escape extinctions with varying forms of shaping, chaining, and 0 had used what's called systematic desensitization, which is what I'm going to talk to you about. And so what's important to note is just how widely used this has always been, but I want to give you that this is not the only way to conduct feeding interventions. And so what we're going to talk about tonight is systematic desensitization and or graduated exposure. Graduated exposure you'll hear is graded exposure or gradual exposure as well. You'll hear these terms used often completely interchangeably. There are slight technical differences with them, so I'll go through the difference between shaping, systematic desensitization, and graduated exposure, so you understand what these three terms are and that they're not really interchangeable terms, even though they're often used that way. So systematic desensitization was developed in the 50s by a psychologist named Joseph Welp, as an intervention for fears and phobias and anxiety. And what it is, it's a gradual exposure to the fear, the phobia. So if you take the fear or phobia and you put it on a scale of 10 and you put whatever that fear is as level 10, then you look at, okay, if that's their level 10 scary, what's level 1? So if they're scared of fireworks, and so being present in in a field of fireworks going off, that might be a level 10 scary. So what could be level 1? Maybe it's looking at pictures in a book of fireworks. Maybe then it's watching them on YouTube with no volume. Then maybe it's watching them on a low volume. Then maybe it's watching them from across the city where they're not hearing them, etc. So you can see how you're starting with what's level 10 scary, what can they currently tolerate, and then what are the successive steps towards that. So systematic desensitization has been effective in treating needle phobia, dental procedures, teeth brushing, feeding, eating, fear of darkness, large stores, transitions, loud sounds, and probably a lot more since over the last few years. How we conceptualize that in an ABA world is we look at it, it's a stimulus fading in the form of gradually increased exposure to the stimulus plus differentially reinforcing each step towards it or each successive approximation. So we're presenting a less demanding form of the stimulus. We're then using mini extinctions that are being shaped forward, chained into tolerating or engaging with the previously aversive stimulus. We use operational definitions at each of these stages and mastery criteria for what successive approximations to the targets look like. So systematic desensitization, it has 3 steps to it. So it has like a calming or relaxation procedure at the beginning, and then the construction of the hierarchy, so that then developing like the 10 steps of, or it might not even be 10, with some people, it depends on what the phobia is and individual. It could be 3 steps, it could be 5, it could be 20, but constructing the hierarchy. You don't always construct this ahead of time. You probably have an idea of the steps, but then based on the data, you're going to either omit steps or add more steps or potentially go a slightly different direction. And then you're going to bring the person through that exposure to that hierarchy and reinforce, staying calm in the presence of this demanding stimuli. So systematic desensitization involving all three of those steps. Graduated exposure using just the last two steps. So graduated exposure technically doesn't involve the relaxation calming procedure. That would happen as the first step. So we just build the hierarchy and then start at step one, expose to that, reinforce, exposure, interaction, engagement, whatever it is that we're working on with that step. Once they met mastery criteria, move on to step two, etc. This is from a chapter that I've written recently on this concept. So I'll just read it quickly because you might not be able to see it on the slide. But this will just differentiate the small differences between shaping, systematic desensitization, and graduated exposure. So the term shaping implies reinforcement of successive approximations to reach the desired target behavior. It can be used to improve and teach various skills from articulation, increasing efficiency with adaptive skills, teaching play routines, increasing food variability or consumption, and many other activities. Shaping does not presuppose that the barrier to achieving the target behavior is fear or anxiety. So with shaping, we use shaping often. And a lot of times it can be a skill deficit, and that's why we're trying to shape it. It could be a behavior we just want to increase. So it could be a motivation deficit. But we're taking that they've already got some indication of this skill, and we're just going to shape it towards the end goal. Whereas systematic desensitization and graduated exposure, they're operating on the belief that the barrier to reaching the target behavior is fear or anxiety or phobic avoidance, and the client is demonstrating phobic avoidance. So, for example, moving from the sound ka to the phrase "I want a cookie" would use shaping. It isn't that we need to expose or desensitize the child or the individual to closer approximations. Whereas an individual who may cry and display a fearful response to seeing vegetables on their plate, graduated exposure or systematic desensitization might be likely warranted. So they might be experiencing a phobic response, and so that's why the exposure and the desensitization can help, and that's the difference between that and shaping. So graduated exposure and systematic desensitization, they use shaping. However, shaping may or may not use the principles of GE or SD. So another key difference in systematic desensitization relies on various cognitive behavioral techniques during the first phase, the relaxation phase, whereas graduated exposure forgoes this phase. So as behavior analysts, it's worth considering that even though we do not implement a distinct relaxation phase prior to beginning exposure to the graded hierarchy, that by supporting your client getting into a calming state in preparation for exposure to the hierarchy will likely be beneficial to their success, and beginning exposure to the hierarchy while in an escalated state might be counterproductive. So even though we might not have like an official phase or step on how to get them into a calming state, something to consider, before exposing to anything that might be fear-evoking, such as new food. We want to make sure that they're in as calm and regulated state as possible. So some of the benefits of using systematic desensitization or graduated exposure over escape extinction. Your dependent variable, so you get to track, because we talked about how there's like those 10 steps, and with the 10th step, if we're talking about eating, would be actually consuming that item. But we've got 1 through 10 before that. What we're actually tracking is something called level of acceptance. So we're actually looking at how much they're willing to engage and accept this. Are they willing to touch it? Are they willing to smell it? Are they willing to lick it? Are they willing to tolerate it on their plate? Are they willing to break it with their teeth? Are they willing to put it in their mouth, close their mouth, and take it out? All of those will be different steps of level of acceptance. And so by tracking them, you can actually see a lot more subtle progress. If we're only tracking did they eat it or not, you might just look like you're getting no, 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 no. But what you might see by tracking the level of acceptance is that they're actually moving through the hierarchy and making progress. By moving through the hierarchy, they're getting naturally repeated taste exposure. So they're getting repeated smell exposure, as well as when we look at the hierarchy, there's steps of, kissing it, licking it, breaking it with your teeth. All of that will help with getting small bits of taste in without the pressure to eat it. And that familiarity is demonstrated to actually show more liking. So the more food becomes familiar, the more we tend to like it. By doing SD or GE, we don't have to worry about as much why they're selective, why, like, where the food selectivity came from. Is it a behavior etiology? Have they just been, has escape extinction or has escaping just been reinforced so much? And it's more of a rigidity where they don't want to expand their repertoire? Or is it very sensory based and it's, the smell, the texture, the way it is on their plate, etc. Systematic desensitization or graduated exposure will address both etiologies, where escape extinction is really looking at the behavior etiology, how to just get over the rigidity and the avoidance or the escape of it. So sensory, if it has more of a sensory etiology, and just like functions of behavior, oftentimes things are multiply controlled, so it can definitely be both the sensory and behavior etiology of where the food selectivity has come from. But being able to have a multisensory exposure to the food without the pressure of consuming it could be a better fit for intervention. Because we're reinforcing all those successive approximations and all those small steps, they're likely going to experience a higher schedule of reinforcement. Because we're, reinforcing tolerating on your plate, we're reinforcing picking up with it, like stabbing it with a fork, we're reinforcing smelling it. All of those steps will be reinforced, where if it was just escape extinction and just looking at consuming the food, they're not going to contact reinforcement nearly as much. This also builds on the principle of behavior momentum. So because level one's, what they're willing to do, what they're able to do without kind of anxiety or phobic response, we can start with that, we can reinforce that, and through these slow incremental changes, build up the momentum. The hierarchy can be highly individualized. So like I said, it could be 5 steps, it could be 100, and it can be very nuanced for whatever is important with that client. And it allows for exploration and positive interactions with the food without pressure to consume. So we'll talk about how we can run this intervention, but a lot of times it's done in a silly, playful way of actually playing with the food and enjoying just the interaction with the food. And I always think, if a child's not willing to touch the food, it's not going in their mouth, or it's not going in their mouth in any sort of enjoyable way. Like if you looked at something and you didn't even want to touch it, or like the thought of it on your plate was so disturbing and someone was trying to get you to eat it, it's just a huge gap from what you're already tolerating to what's expected, where this allows for exploration without the pressure of consuming it. So at the time when I did this study, a lot of people had asked, like, with so much research behind escape extinction, like, why even go with something else? Like, escape extinction's efficient, it's fast, it's largely replicated. So some of my reasons at the time for needing a different way were a way like this is going to be easier to implement with less supervision, so more cost effective because you're having limited supervision, limited ABA session times. We're able to either train the parent or train a BI, but because we're doing more so play, like if you conceptualize it more as like playing and interacting with the food, rather than how an escape extinction procedure would run, which if anyone's done, a feeding program with like West Coast Feeding or a different feeding clinic, they can be there 8 hours a day, all day long, waiting for the child to consume food, right? And so you're going to need someone that's highly trained, highly supervised, and for long periods of time if you're doing escape extinction in order to do it safely. So it can be highly resource intensive, and with our kids with limited funding, that might not be an option. I believe the second way, like systematic desensitization or graduated exposure, is far less aversive for the child as well as for the person implementing the procedure. So if you've ever had to run escape extinction for food selectivity, personally as a BI, I found it awful. The child wasn't having fun, I wasn't having fun. It didn't feel right for me, as well as I didn't feel that we're like making food in any way more fun or more enjoyable. It was a very much means to an end, like eat this and get this, eat this and get this, where I love the concept of like, how can we get them to just enjoy interacting with food more, regardless of the focus of like on consumption. Parents may be more successful with this type of implementation because with escape extinction, like you really have to be prepared to wait it out till the end. And if after an hour you decide to call it, then the child might be reinforced for like, okay, I can just wait them out. Then I get to escape this food and I'm offered another food later. And it's going to be very hard, and rightfully so, for parents to probably successfully implement an escape extinction procedure. By doing a graduated exposure, it reduces the likelihood of reinforcing inappropriate behaviors on a VR schedule. So escape extinction, unless it's followed through all the time, it could be like variably reinforced. And it will fit under a PBS paradigm where escape extinction will likely not. So sometimes depending on the restrictions that you might be under, depending on where you work for, that could be highly beneficial. So things before we get into the actual study that I did. I like this slide about just redefining eating expectations. So rather than just thinking eating means the like total consumption of the food, start to think of like eating as the interaction of the food. So tolerating and looking at it, smelling it, touching it, licking it, biting, chewing, and then swallowing. So it's all those components rather than what so many programs focus on is really just the chewing and swallowing of the program of the food. So we want to increase the levels of tolerance. So this is a smaller hierarchy. So tolerating it near them, interacting with the food, smelling the food, touching the food, tasting, and eating. And so under each of those, there could be multiple targets within that. So selecting food targets. So I find this to be so important, and I find oftentimes it's done without a lot of thought, or it's like done. The parents are like, I want my child to eat this, so we put those in as targets without thinking of like, how can we shape towards those targets? Like, what are they currently eating, and then how do we build a bridge to where we want to go with that? So always begin with single foods rather than combinations of food, so we can really see which foods are accepted and which ones aren't. So starting with a cracker or a piece of bread versus like a full sandwich with condiments and cheese, and because there could be one component on the sandwich that they don't like, and when we're mixing everything together, they might refuse the sandwich altogether when really it's one component of it. So we want to gradually change flavor, texture, color, or shape over time, but not all at the same time. So we kind of pick one component and start to modify that. Building schedules or rituals with it. So the younger the child, we can make little songs with it, like we got yogurt, I'm going to go stir, stir, lick, stir, stir, lick. And it makes it just, more fun and more predictable of what's coming. Looking at preference for texture. So you can do this through some anecdotal data collection or observation of what are they currently eating. So do they like crunchy? Do they like pureed? Is it chewy? Again, when you have the option, I would say almost always an SLP or NOT should at least be part of the intake to rule out that there's any kind of oral motor or postural deficits or skills or things that might be interfering with the food selectivity to begin with. But if the child's only eating pureed food, that could be a sign, again, of something like oral motor strength or an ability to swallow, or why they're, gravitating towards food like that. So we want to introduce variations of accepted food. So this is one way to build up the repertoire. So looking at what are they currently accepting, and then how do we make small changes to that. So if they currently accept fries, can we change, crinkled fries to straight fries to whatever those type of fries are called? If they only eat chicken McNuggets, can we work on chicken fingers at home or changing the packaging? Sometimes I've just started with even taking regular nuggets and changing the packaging. And that can be a whole step in itself of just getting them used to eating like something with a slight change in it. Changing taste and flavor. Um, Working through the goldfish crackers, different flavors of chips, yogurt flavors, changing the texture of something with the same flavor. So, say like sweet potato chips. What about sweet potato fries? What about sweet potato, mashed sweet potato, and then sweet potato like that. So those are just some ways to extend variation or to probe extending variation and how flexible they are if you're making one small change to it. But something like this, you're likely to be more successful. Oh, I've skipped one too. Changing color as well. You're likely more successful than just pulling a target kind of out of the blue. Like if they're, eating sweet potato, trying to just add broccoli, that might just take a lot longer than slowly building a bridge. Maybe we'll stick with orange first and move to carrots that taste kind of similar, and then move our way through vegetables that way. A really interesting or great tool if you're starting any feeding intervention is called the BAMBI, the Brief Autism Mealtime Behavior Inventory. And so it's like a 21-ish questionnaire for the parents to look at just mealtime behaviors in general, food refusal in general, and it's a Likert scale along with yes or no. But what you can do, you can total it, you can get a full score, and then at the start, you can do that for your baseline at the start of the intervention, and then at the end of the intervention, redo it and look for these more like socially valid changes. So some of the things that we'd love to see change, like, my child cries or screams during mealtime. So if that was true, we definitely want to look at like how do we make mealtime more enjoyable so that's not happening, right? Seeing a reduction in that score would be amazing. My child turns his head or face or body away from food. My child's disruptive during mealtime. My child insists on using certain utensils at mealtime. My child prefers the same foods at each meal, prefers crunchy foods. So there's just there's scores for each of these, and it will just give you some sort of comparison afterwards to see how much more flexible the child has become with mealtime. We're going to look at a study that I did, again, 5 years ago with Bianca Andrioni. She's a local BCBA as well. So our study is called Using Graduated Exposure and Differential Reinforcement to Increase Food Repertoire in a Child with Autism. Something cool is that since we published this, the study's been cited 29 times in different articles. So at the time, as I said, there was very few alternatives to escape extinction. And so I think that's why this article became fairly popular amongst feeding literatures. It was something different. It was a different way to intervene. And so, yeah, it's been referenced quite a lot since we published it. This was a single subject design with just one participant. His pseudonym was Sam. He was about 3.5 years old when we began, diagnosed with ASD just before 3. We ran the program for 9 months. So it was just part of his regular ABA program. And so part of his daily sessions, there was a feeding component to it. So we'd run about 3 to 4 feeding sessions per week. Prior to the start, he only ate 4 foods exclusively, confirmed by a 3-day food journal. We'll look at those foods in a minute. So he had high food refusal, he had limited food repertoire, and high single food intake. This participant, he had strong cognition. He was developmentally caught up with his peers, and he also had a strong imitative repertoire, which was important for this type of intervention. He's also very cooperative, low challenging behaviors during sessions typically. So we didn't see a lot of protest behavior throughout different activities that we did, nothing any more than a typical 3.5-year-old would exhibit. So what he would eat before we began was yogurt, Honey Nut Cheerios, cheddar goldfish, and beefaroni. So these were the only 4 foods that his diet consisted of. His mom supplemented as much as she could with Pediasure, and he drank a lot of apple juice. The intervention sessions were run in just a regular therapy room in a clinic setting. So the room kind of looked like this. After 6 months, we moved more to the kitchen in the clinic and started to eat in a more generalized setting. But we were also doing generalization at the same time, which was taking place in his preschool or at home. So as part of his ABA sessions, he had 4 2.5-hour ABA sessions a week. The food program ran before snack in order to increase motivating operations. His ABA session was also full of play-based, DTT, circle time, peer play, and the food program. And then after, as I said, then we generalized it to the kitchen as well. So we created a 12-step eating hierarchy. We trained loosely, so focus on fun and silly interaction. So we didn't have it to have to be like super structured and run the same each time. I'll explain kind of the variations that we could do. He would earn tokens throughout to get a tangible, often it was like a toy he was interested in. We didn't use edible reinforcements during it, so it was never like eat this and get this. It was just, a break or a toy. Of course, no full prompting to complete the task. If refusal occurred, we'd go back a few steps in the hierarchy to obtain success and regain behavior momentum. But we always wanted it to be fully unprompted so that it was really the child choosing to engage with the food and not as prompting. Again, this was back where I would say physical prompting was more commonplace, and we've moved a lot away from physical prompting in general across any programs. But at the time, there was a lot more physical prompting taking place across most programs. So the eating hierarchy that we that we created for him was first just tolerating the new food in the room, tolerating it on the table that he was sitting at, and then him being able to touch the food, squish the food and throw it away. We had a little garbage bin right on the table. So you could see how quickly he could just like squish it, throw it away, smell it, throw it away, kiss it, throw it away, lick, throw away, lick 5 times, break with his teeth and throw away, chew 5 times, spit it out, throw away, eat a small piece, and eat an entire piece. And so how we would focus on silliness, so we would do this, show you what the plate setup would look like, as we had so many little pieces of whatever the target food, so we'd have 4 target foods at the same time. We break them into really small pieces, and then it was like a copy me, so I would be like, oh, I'm gonna smell the food. Oh, I'm gonna touch my cheek with it, even though cheek might not be on there. I might do that just to be silly with it. And then I'd be like, what else should we do? And then he might say, let's touch our eyebrow. It'd be great, let's touch our eyebrow. Oh, I'm gonna give it a kiss. And that's how I might build up to like that next step. So prior to starting, we had the parent interview of just kind of things that they've tried in the past, their concerns. We took a 3-day food journal, so just writing down everything he ate for 3 days. We had an OT and SLP assessment prior to beginning to rule out any co-occurring issues. We selected the first 4 targets, and unlike kind of the information that I said about building the bridge, that information kind of came later to me, so we probably could have selected targets a little closer to what he was currently eating. But we did carrots, grapes, Ritz crackers. They were like the fish crackers, and cheese. Foods were cut up into small pieces, and he could pick whichever he wanted to do at any time. So if we wanted to do carrot first, let's do carrots. We might do 2 carrots, and then he might want to switch to grapes. He might want to switch to crackers. So he had full choice about moving around that way. So we'd imitate each trial, and we'd work through the 12 desensitization steps, and we would just tally how many foods he would do at each step and what was the last step he got to each day. A gagging protocol, so if he at all showed a gagging response, what we would do is we'd go back 2 steps and then we'd quickly finish with the food. We didn't want the gagging to create a chain of like a gag and the food goes away instantly. Because gagging can then turn into a learned response in order to get the food to go away. But we would So with carrots, I think it happened where we saw a gag on carrots. So say that was when he was breaking it with his teeth. I would go back to like, so he'd break it with his teeth. I'd be like, okay, let's smell it, throw it away. I'm gonna touch it or squish it, throw it away. Okay, let's do crackers now. So the gagging wasn't the last thing that occurred right before it went away, but we definitely lessened the demand. And then if we saw gagging 3 times with a certain food, we just eliminated it from the targets and moved on to different foods. I think that only happened with 1, maybe 2 foods with him. We would do at least 5 pieces of food with any target food, and then we'd record his furthest step attained. Mastery criteria was 2 consecutive sessions at step 12, so eating 2 full pieces of it, and then we would move it to, we'd introduce another target, and we move that target to generalization. And I'll talk about our generalization procedures later. So this is what like our data sheet would look like one day. And this would be a few days in. This, of course, wasn't the first day, but so for that day, we might have started with carrot. We licked it because, you know, previous days showed he could get through this part, no problem. So we did that. We moved on to licking 5 times. We did a few trials there before we moved to break with teeth. And that's as far as we got that day. So we recorded as our further step was step 9. For the cracker, so we ate a full piece of cracker. So if we had this 2 days in a row, then we would then move cracker to generalization and introduce a new food here. How we would do baseline is we'd just put the food in the therapy room 20 minutes before snack time and record any level of interaction with it. So we just put it on the table. Like, we just wanted to make sure that he wouldn't just go up to it and, you know, eat it, or if he went up and just started to engage with it, we would start at a further step. But this was just to show that these weren't foods that he would readily consume. Okay, so we'll look at the targets in groups of 4. Breakdown by target, how many cumulative new foods he added, and then what that looked like for generalization. So the first 4 targets, and I've run this type of intervention with many kids, and this is very common of what you see, and it can be discouraging the first 4. So like I said, the part by doing level of acceptance, you do get to see many small, subtle changes. So looking at these graphs, we do see he is moving towards consuming the food. He is making small changes each day. But if you look at the number of days and sessions before he was consuming food, so what are the X's there? It's anywhere from, you know, like 28 to like 36 sessions before he was actually readily eating the foods. And that was for the first 4 targets. But once he mastered those first 4 targets, then their next set of 4 targets, they went much quicker. So we got there anywhere between 8 days, and with the last target being between 18 and 20 days. So the time like cut either in half or even into like more than that. So you could see picking up much more. And then our next set of targets, you see like we're getting to step 10 or 12 on session 2 and session 3. So every new targets we'd introduce after that, we started at much higher on the hierarchy and mastering them much quicker. So with this set being 8 days being the longest it would take, or 8 sessions being the longest, with some foods even mastered on day 2 and day 3. So this is the number of sessions it took to put in the mouth and number of sessions to consume the full piece. So just another way to show the data. So again, the first few targets, you know, 22 sessions before you even put it in the mouth, 38 sessions before you actually ate 1 piece. However, you can see the snowball effect as he accepted more foods and as he became more flexible with eating, it just started to move much quicker, where we could then incorporate new crackers and new cheese, new granola bars, an alternative yogurt brand, dried mango. Like dried mango is a huge one because he wasn't eating kind of anything with that texture prior. and it took only 3 days to get into his mouth and 3 days or 5 days to actually eat a full piece of it. And then the foods got more complex from there. So something like turkey sandwich meat. By the time it got there, he was able to put it into his mouth on the first day and actually eat a piece on the first day. And same with noodles and Teddy Grahams. And so, my advice with this program is the first few sets of foods do take a long time. And that's definitely one of the limitations we'll talk about with this type of method, is you want to make sure that you have time, right? With this child, he was eating, but he had a healthy body weight. So it wasn't anything that was like dire. It wasn't like if he doesn't eat, he's going to be on a feeding tube. And so if you're in that situation, this type of intervention might not be an appropriate intervention. You might need to do something that's much quicker, more intensive, and that's where you'll probably need a lot more kind of supervision and expertise. Just going to make sure my computer's plugged in. So just know, if you ever do run something like this, that every time I've run it, I've seen very common or very similar trajectory. What was really cool, so after we hit step 12, so once the child ate an entire piece 2 days in a row, then what we do is test for generalization. And so what that looked like is we would have the food out, not during intervention time, or it would be sent to him at preschool as part of a snack, or just put out at home with no pressure, no SD to even eat it. And we would just observe if he would spontaneously, naturally go up, take a piece, and voluntarily eat it without any pressure. Because we thought even us saying, hey, do you want a piece? There could be, it might not be that easy to tell if it was fully by choice. So generalization was fully by choice, that there was no pressure. It was sent to him as part of his snack. It was just presented out, and it was just available, and we were just checking, will he eat it then? And so what we saw is half the food. So within, as I said, it took place over 9 months. So over the 9 months, he acquired, within 100 sessions, 46 novel foods had been eaten during the intervention. And during the same time, 27 of those foods have been consumed outside of intervention, either during snack time, at the clinic, or reported from home. And so, we had great generalization in that you could really see his food repertoire expanding, and the enjoyment of food expanding, and his choice to eat more foods expanding. Something else, this wasn't part of this study, but I just put this in, with some of the kids I've worked with that are a bit older, is I'll really work on food vocabulary and creating what we call like a food dictionary. So we'll first start with foods that they already eat, and just work on like the profile of the food. Like, what does it look like? What does it smell like? And then getting them to describe the flavor. So we're just really like arming them with a lot more language so that they can tell us more what they like and what they don't like about something. Rather than just saying it's yucky, they can say it's sticky, or it's too fizzy, or it's sour. They'll have that actual vocabulary. Without that, they'll just, often say it's yucky, and you won't really know what they don't like about it. So starting with a profile of foods that they do like, and learning, teaching, is this one sweet or salty or spicy? Is it crunchy? Is it slippery? And getting them to be able to describe those foods so that when we start to introduce new foods, they can talk about the parts of it that they like and don't like. And then just being able to categorize it. Do they know which kind of food it belongs to? And that can help later with just self-monitoring and setting them up, if with more independence, being able to know that I eat, foods across many different categories. So just creating some more vocabulary. Sorry, that was a bit randomly stuck in there, but so a bit of a discussion on that. So graded exposure was effective to increase food repertoire and decrease food refusal. As a result, a decrease in high frequency single food intake occurred, like where he wasn't eating the same food all day, every day. It generalized to different people, environments, and foods that were not trained, so he was more willing to just try other foods. His mom would come in each day, towards the end of the program and be like, oh my God, he ate um, of like white sauce pasta, or like some of the frozen food meals and stuff that like had different sauces and different vegetables and so much going on in there that he's began eating. Parent report, less mealtime behavior and food selectivity is no longer a parent concern. So social significance, so as I talked, that Bambi assessment, so there are lots of changes in scores, but scores like my child is disruptive during meal times, which before it was 5, after it was 2, so disruptiveness really went down. My child prefers the same food at each meal, again, it went from a 5 to a 2. So some limitations with that study, so it's only one participant. We did use one-to-one implementation, so resource-wise. I did run the same procedure afterwards in group. So I ran at a group of the kids, and I also trained a group of parents to do parents at home. And actually, out of all 3, so out of the one-to-one with the child, a group of kids, and the parents working directly with kids, the parents actually had the greatest success and had the best outcomes, which was kind of cool. I don't have that data published, but that was just anecdotal. So it took 28 sessions before the first novel food was consumed. So definitely a limitation if you're looking for something that's fast and effective. And if you're only looking at how quickly a child's going to consume new foods as your target, you could definitely see like drawbacks to this kind of program. What I wrote a lot about in the chapter that I just wrote about feeding is that we need to look beyond just how many bites they're having, how quickly they're consuming things, and really look at like, have we improved mealtime and enjoyment in mealtime? Are they less stressed around food? Are we seeing less phobic and fearful behavior at the sight of new foods? Like, I think those type of dependent variables are, very valuable. Again, it depends on the severity and the time sensitivity that you have to work on this. So if it is something urgent, definitely there's probably a different approach that would be better. But when you do have time, you can look at it as more a long-term thing. Like, how do we improve the relationship with food? How do we decrease stress around the presentation of new food and move at a slower pace rather than just focus on how quickly we can get them to consume new food? So you can look at the 28 sessions definitely as a drawback of the program, but depending on what the goals are, it might not be that much. Because BC has program funding, this was just funded through its ABA program. Other provinces or states, it might be limited for how you could run this. We had access to an SLP and OT, one of the benefits of being at a clinic. So again, that could be another barrier or limitation to starting. It can take a while to get those assessments done. The severity, so if a food tube was, looking like it was a possibility if things don't change quickly, escape extinction might be a better option. Again, I would go to a super professional in that area that's dealt with food selectivity of that kind of severity. We didn't do a preference assessment with the reinforcers that we used. He was pretty good at just telling us what he wanted to work for, have a break with that day. And we relied on parent report for both the food journal and the generalization data. And then just some references. Yeah, so anyways, I hope you've learned a little bit about a different way to address food selectivity, how to make it more playful. There was another, there's a similar method that's an OT-based method called SOS feeding, so sequential oral sensory feeding intervention. This is similar in that it does work with a hierarchy. We've just kind of like taken it in ABA-ized it a little more by creating more operational definitions, looking at more the theoretical like underpinnings of it, using differential reinforcement, etc. And then there's been a few other studies that have used like a graduated exposure, systematic desensitization approach since. So in the last feeding meta-analysis where there was maybe about like 30 articles. There were 3 or 4 that used something other than escape extinction, that used kind of a hierarchy like this, ours being one of them. Yeah, if you have any questions, you can try and reach out on email. I'm not the best at getting back in a timely manner, but a better way probably to connect is a direct message on Instagram at Dr. Amy Tanner. And hopefully I'll have some courses launching soon. If you're all interested, you can check out my website. And I've also got links to this paper, other papers I've published, and some other presentations and stuff I've done on there. So you can find that at my website, which is dramytanner.com. Anyways, I hope you guys have a great night and a great discussion, and hope to hear from you guys soon.